So my name is Rebecca Hopman, and I'm the Outreach Librarian here at the Corning Museum of Glass. So welcome to the Rakow Research Library. We are the world's foremost collection on glass, all sorts of different topics. So the science, the art, techniques, technology, history, design, architecture, anything you can think about, we have resources on it for you. So we're so excited to have you here on this tour and want to just tell you a little bit about the different things that we have for you in our collection.
So welcome to the library, and Beth and Rebecca have pulled out a whole bunch of resources for us to look at. And as we walked up here, they quickly pointed out this is just barely scratching the surface of what's available around here. So Beth, do you have some favorite items to point to around here?
Well, the first thing we reach for is often Bondu Scott Dunham's books. And he worked here in the library when he was doing his research and very generously gave us copies of each of the different editions. It's really great because he went to all of the lamp workers and had them test what he was doing. So you really can depend on what he's been saying. Another one I really like, she concentrates on Boro, is Elizabeth Mears. John Burton is an old standard. He used flame working in a very different way with blowpipes. So that's really an interesting read. He had a television program and got people excited about lamp working.
And I think a lot of torch talkers would be familiar with Sue Ellen Fowler, who has developed a lot of borosilicate color. Well, she was an early student and protege of John Burton. He was really one of the first artists to start making borosilicate color, and Sue Ellen got involved in his workshop out at Pepperdine University back in the 70s, and that's where a lot of borosilicate color really sort of stemmed from. We tend to take it for granted nowadays, but it started really with Burton and Sue Ellen.
We've got scientific glass blowing. This is Wheeler. There are others from the British Society of Scientific Glass Blowers.
Those have been some of my favorite things to dig into, some of the old scientific manuals. I had to do some research recently looking into the history of borosilicate, and I was curious to see how borosilicate sort of changed scientific glass blowing. And as you look through some of these scientific manuals from the 30s into the 50s, you really see a change in how people were approaching glass because borosilicate allowed for it. So yeah, some interesting little tidbits in there.
They have a publication, Fusion, and your audience is going to be familiar with magazines like these, The Flow, and so on. We have lots of videos, and then special things, torchwork marbles, all kinds of bead books. So just a wide variety of materials that are available to you here. Yeah. And if we have 2 copies of a book, you can get them through interlibrary loan. So you go to your local library, request the item, and as I said, if we have 2 copies, we can send one to your library. You use it for 4 weeks and then send it back. They'll send it back to us. You have to use it in the library.
Torch talkers are really big on video and being able to watch video. So what sort of video possibilities do we have for them here? And
we have lots of videos, but they do have to be used in the library. So those we can't send on interlibrary loan. But the museum does have tons and tons of videos on their website, so those are well worth looking into.
People might be familiar with our YouTube channel as well. There's all sorts of things that we've produced that are on our YouTube channel. So lots of options available at the Rakow Library and also our online resources.
So on our standard tour, we usually take people through our collection back here so they get a little bit of an idea of the scope of how many things we have and the variety of subjects that we have in our collection. So I'll just take you on back across the glass bridge. So like Beth said, you can certainly request things to be sent to you. If we have a second copy, we'll do that. But there's also a lot of things that you can really only experience when you're in the library, so hopefully all of you will be able to come and visit at some point. So these are some of our open stacks. So I don't know if you want to get a shot or two of some of these rows. So like I mentioned, we really have books on every glass topic you can imagine. Journal articles, AV materials, so really all sorts of different things. This aisle has a lot of contemporary artist books in it. So it's really amazing just to be able to walk down the stacks and, take enameling and, stained glass and all sorts of different topics, just all right here in this one room. There's lots of different inspiring books that you can browse through while you're in here. And this part of our collection is open to the public, so if you ever come here, you can come into these stacks, you can browse, you can pull things off, bring them back into the reading room. So there's really all sorts of different ways you can access our collection. If I remember correctly, right now we have about 600,000 physical items in our collection and about another 300,000 that we've digitized. So we do have a digitization program here where we actively try to make as much of our materials accessible online as possible. So anything that's in the public domain or that we have copyright permissions for, we will put up online. Often that's stuff that's published before 1923 in America, and also a lot of really old manuscripts, rare books, design drawings, things like that. So I actually want to take you down our techniques aisle, because I know the Torch Talk group is really excited about technique resources. So right around here we have some more flame working things, bead making, fused glass, all sorts of different books. And again, most of these you can request a copy be sent to your local library to use. And those that you can't, we will try to make as easily accessible to you as we possibly can. There's a whole section here on science and technology manufacturing. We have materials in, I think, 58 different languages. So if English isn't your first language, or if you have a second language that you can read in, we have materials probably in that language for you. And we have all sorts of unexpected things in our collection. So for example, this is our collection of glass fiction. So if you ever want a romance novel, a mystery, a thriller, we have all sorts of fun things for you to look at. We have children's books about glass.
Oh, wow.
So, we have all kind of the traditional things that you might think of, but we have some really unexpected things in the collection as well. So I am now taking you into our special collections. Ooh. So this is a staff-only area, and this is where we keep all of our rare materials, one-of-a-kind things, things that need some extra preservation. So there's all sorts of wonderful materials back here: design drawings, artist sketchbooks, artist archives, company records, maps, design drawings, ephemera, anything you can think of that's kind of rare, old, unique. We have a lot of that back here. So I just want to give you a peek at the extent of our special collections. It is a pretty huge facility. And actually every single one of these aisles you can see rolls open, so we can fit many more resources in here than we would with just our regular kind of stacks.
Actually, at the Rakow Library, we try to collect as comprehensively as possible on the art history and science of glass. And this is one of our favorite scientific texts. This is Robert Hooke's Micrographia. It's the first book dedicated entirely to observation of objects under a microscope. And it was published in 1665 while Robert Hooke was the curator of experiments for the Royal Society. It includes a lot of wonderful illustrations, including this absolutely beautiful etching of a flea. And if you can imagine, at the time period, people hadn't actually seen a lot of these objects so close up, and so they were really seeing a flea close up for the first time through this volume, and it really caused a sensation in its time. It's absolutely a beautiful illustration.
So, did want to mention that Micrographia by Robert Hooke. Hooke was the first person to mention lampworker in his book and use that term. The Oxford English Dictionary gives him credit to describe people who were using the lamp or the torch to do their work.
All right, so I have a couple other rare books to show you as well. We wanted to pull out some that had some images of lamp workers in them. So I have this book, Die Glasschmelzkunst, and this is from 1769, and we wanted to show you this fantastic image not only of lamp workers but of some of the equipment that they were making, some scientific pieces. You can see a very early microscope here. So again, this would have been another kind of engraving maybe an acid etched engraving that they would have printed many times over for different copies of the book. This is Johann Kunkel's translation of Antonio Neri's The Art of Glass, so one of the most important early glassmaking manuals that was used really as the main source of glassmaking knowledge for a couple hundred years. And this is actually one of the illustrations of flame workers in the 1785 edition, I believe. This is a great one because it shows women flame working. There's a long history of women lamp working that I think a lot of people aren't really aware of, so it's really wonderful to have some of these images to show off. And just a reminder that everything you're seeing here these are the types of things that we have available online, fully digitized. So if you're interested in seeing some of these more kind of historic texts, often they are in Latin, German, Italian, but they have a lot of wonderful images in them, and if you can read those languages, they have some pretty great information as well. So Beth has a few books on color that she wanted to talk about and show you as well.
So we're going to start with our oldest volume. This is the Mappa Clavicula. So it's about 1150, and it's all handwritten. It's on vellum, and it is the very early record of medieval technology. So lots of recipes for all kinds of things, from sesame seed candy to pigments that were used for windows. So just an amazing book. Natural Experiments, 1684. And what I love about this one is all of the glass that is shown. So any glass, it goes chapter by chapter, different experiments, and then the glassware, the scientific glassware that was made for each one of those experiments. So again, much of this was done by lamp working. So I did want to show you some of our batch books or glass recipe books. This is from around 1900 or the 1860s to 1900. Corning Glassworks. This was the Houghton's own batch books, and all kinds of different recipes. And these have been digitized, so you can go to our color LibGuide, click on a link, and go right into our catalog and be able to read these pages. And there are about 112 different batch books that are available. So we don't recommend you try to copy these exactly, because the chemicals, the oxides and so on, have changed over time. There's a lot of arsenic and other really toxic materials that were still being used during this period. So use them as a base for experimentation, to understand what was done in the past and think about what you could do for the future. I haven't found any of the batch books that have borosilicate recipes, so they'd have to be adapted. Well, Colored Glasses is really one of the most important books as far as understanding color and its chemistry, so this is a really good place to start if you want to learn more.
All right, so I'm just going to take you down the aisle, down to our archival collections. But just in passing, I want to mention there's so many more things that we have here that we're not going to have time to talk about. So for example, we have a large collection of trade catalogs. So these are companies' sales catalogs. They're really great when you're looking for shape inspiration, but also if you're interested in glass from a particular company at a particular point in time. We also have a huge number of auction catalogs in our collection, which are often used especially by our curators and other glass collectors, to trace the provenance of some of the pieces of glass being bought and sold. And I want to stop for just a little bit at our vertical file collection. So this is one of the ways that you can become part of our collection here at the Rakow Library. So we have this collection of vertical files. So these are literally filing folders. And we have two sections, one for glass artists and one for all different sorts of very specific glass topics. In our glass artist collections, over 10,000 artists are represented. And this is not a collection at all that we kind of select based on how famous a glass artist is, how many publications or exhibitions they've been in. This is a place where we want to document as many glass artists as possible. So if you have a brochure from an exhibition, if you have a CV, if you have some photographs of your work you'd like to contribute, if you just send them to the Rakow Library, you can become an official part of our collection. And I think a lot of flame workers and lamp workers already are. So for example, we have lots of files from Ginny Ruffner. So this looks like it's from an exhibition, a reception for an exhibition in 1990. Some more material related to her work. So this is really a way to start thinking about your legacy as an artist. Just start getting information about yourself out there and into the Rakow's permanent collection. I know as a reference librarian, I get questions all the time about artists, and sometimes this is the only place in our collection where we can find information on them. So, for example, some of the women who were involved in the very early studio glass movement, they're not really documented in books or articles often, but they may have a folder in the vertical file that we're able to pull information from. So we have Ginny Ruffner, all sorts of familiar names. We also have Robert Mickelson, Shane Farrow. So sometimes you'll see a newspaper clipping related to Mickelson. Sometimes we'll have postcards from the artists that were sent to the curators that are in this collection. So all sorts of different really great things just documenting the careers of these folks. And again, anyone can send material in if you're just starting out as an artist, if you're many years into your career, we'll start a folder about you, and it's a great way for people interested in lamp workers, flame workers, pipe makers to find out about those people.
This area is where we house the archives, and these are all kinds of special materials that are directly from glass companies, from artists, from scholars who have done research about glass, authors, just all kinds of wonderful primary research material. So if you're familiar with Dominic Labino, who's one of the fathers of the studio movement, we have 72 boxes of his office records, both from when he was working in industry, in the glass industry, and from when he was working as a glass artist. So we have Rondu Scott Dunham's archives. Paul Stankard is giving us wonderful things. It is more of an invitational, but if you're interested in donating records, do contact our archivist. We're happy to talk with you about that. And we really do want to know about the history of the whole pipe movement. So it's really important for us to capture some of that information. So I'm going to show you the Blaschka archives. So the Blaschkas, Leopold and Rudolf Blaschka, were father and son team. And many people know them because of the Harvard flowers, the glass flowers in the collections there. They also did sea creatures before that, and those models are in universities throughout the world. So they have an extensive reach and were very influential at the time. We have their drawings. So this is one of the sea creatures, and you can tell it's meticulous. They numbered all of their models, so those are the numbers that you're seeing. And these are working drawings. Some of them have coffee stains, tea stains, little burned edges, as if you were using the design drawing. So it's a very personal record. It's really wonderful. And you can tell we keep these in acid-free folders, very carefully labeled. So all of the different parts of the plant labeled, from seed all the way up to when the blossoms are exhausted. So really wonderful record. But we also have their correspondence. We have all the records of where they sold, their business, just all kinds of different information. They did tours through the United States on ships, recording these drawings so that they could use them for their models. They were one of the first people to have an aquarium. So they were brand new and just really wonderful examples of incredible lamp working. So these drawings, again, have been digitized. They're available to see on the website.
Well, we try to collect glass as comprehensively as possible, of course, in the Rakow Library. And one of the big parts of our collection is our collection of stained glass cartoons. We have an estimated 30,000 stained glass cartoons from several stained glass studios, including Cummings and the Whitefriars Stained Glass Studio. And this is an example of one of our, actually, this is Clayton and Bell. One of the design drawings for those stained glass cartoons. Thanks, Eric.
So these are drawings that are to scale, so
They are.
know the glass cutters would know exactly what colors and what sizes and,
Yep.
and what sort of design to cut out.
Yeah, and which illustrations, and the illustrations that they wanted to transfer to the glass as well. And so this is more about the illustration here than the actual cutting of the glass. But we have some, they're essentially the jigsaw puzzle that would be the individual pieces of glass that they're cutting out. Again, this is the design drawing for Robert Sauer's stained glass installation at the American Airlines terminal at the JFK airport. Absolutely beautiful piece, and fortunate we have the design drawing too. This was recently torn out of the facility, and so no longer exists in this form. It's one of the favorite items in our collection, at least one of my favorites, I think. One of all of our favorites. This is a design drawing for a stained glass window by Harry Clark, who is an Irish artist. It was done in the 19-teens for the Honan Chapel in Cork, Ireland. And the subject of the stained glass is Saint Gubnet, who is the patron saint of beekeepers. And so if you look close up at the design drawing, you can see that Clark has incorporated a number of bee elements in here, including the bees, which surround her, the saint here, and also honeycomb shapes in the glass itself. He did a number of windows for the Honan Chapel, and each of the windows of the saints has little vignettes in both the upper and lower part of the glass. And so in the upper vignette, you can see that she's summoning a wall to protect people from the plague. It's the white wall here, and then you can see the people outside the wall. And in the bottom vignette, she's summoning a horde of bees to drive off brigands. And so you can see the bee there and the brigand, and that theme just wraps around behind her there. So beautiful piece, and truly one of our the favorite pieces in the collection.
Great. So this is our flat files area. So this is where we store oversized things that need to be kept flat, like posters, large newspapers, all sorts of different handbills and broadsides. So an earlier form of posters, maps, things like that. And I want to show you one of my favorite things at the library. So these are handbills and broadsides. So again, these kind of early posters and pamphlets for a group of people that we like to call itinerant glassworkers. So these were lamp workers who, as early as the 1670s, were traveling around Europe, later America, and later pretty much every continent, showing, demonstrating lamp working to people. So spinning glass, creating an early version of fiberglass, lamp working, doing all sorts of different scientific experiments with glass. So these are just a very few examples of the collection that we have. We have a really great record of these glass workers, and both, the very old and the very new. So this was a tradition that went on for about 300 years. But we're also really excited that this collection includes several examples of women who led their own troops or participated in these lampworking demonstrations. So my favorite handbill I want to show you really quick is this one for Madame Nora's troop of glass blowers, glass spinners, and glass workers. So you can see there's Madame Nora with her great updo and all the little flame-worked pieces she had around her. So she led a troop of a varying group of members, but it included her son, her daughter-in-law, and some other well-known lamp workers of the time. And they would travel around. They did a lot of demonstrations in New York State, actually. And they would travel around and show off different skills. They had a steam engine similar to this one, the Fairy Queen. So this was a working steam engine made of glass. If you're familiar with a lot of Bandu Dunham's kinetic sculptures, he was inspired directly by some of these steam engines. And it was just a really great way to educate the public about lampworking, what you could do with this type of glass making. And it's a kind of demonstration that I think a lot of us think of, you know, today at the Courtney Museum of Glass and some of the other museums. We have these hot glass demonstrations, but these are things that have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years for the public. And just for you guys, so these are two of the first glassworkers that came to America. So Tilly is the earliest person that we know was demonstrating lamp work publicly in America. He came over in August 1819. And Mr. Finn followed in the 1820s and 30s and 40s. And then really kind of from about the 1840s to the early 1900s, that was when they were kind of at their peak of popularity. They traveled around in P.T. Barnum's circus, they appeared in a lot of museums, they demonstrated at World's Fairs. So they were really kind of all over the place. This was kind of an entertainment that came to your town before you had movie theaters or cars or other kind of modes of mass transportation and entertainment. Some of these itinerant glassworkers, so I know Robert Mickelson, I'm pretty positive he's mentioned before that he was trained by some of the 20th century itinerant glassworkers. So really, these flame workers, I think we could probably say, Eric could probably confirm because he knows more than I do, but probably say that this kind of tradition helped influence some of the flame working traditions of today. And some of the people who first learned and then taught all of the other lamp workers and flame workers of more recent generations.
So we haven't shown you a lot of glass today, but I did want to show one engraving. This is by Carl Coping, and it's of Art Nouveau style lamp-worked goblets. The Museum of Glass does have one of his pieces, not just because it's a beautiful object. We also support the study of our curators and the research of scholars, and you can find a piece that's very much like this in the Victoria and Albert Museum in England. So it's really great to have documentation for this type of work.
So currently on display in the library is our exhibition, Curious and Curiouser, Surprising Finds from the Rakow Library. It's on display until February 2019, so you have a lot of time to still come and see it. And it basically combines some unexpected things that you might not think would be in a library collection, along with stories of how people have been inspired by the library and the materials in our collection. So this is, for example, what we call our glass house money collection. So in the 1900s, these were actual currency issued by companies. They would pay their workers with it, and the workers could only then pay them back for the rent on the company properties that they lived in and for the goods in the company stores. So it was a really a way of kind of controlling the flow of money to and from employees to their bosses. We have some wonderful fiberglass materials, so crocheted fiber tea cloth, a dress that was made in 1893 for the World's Fair in Chicago by the Libby Glass Company for Princess Eulalia of Spain, a bonnet, fiberglass bonnet that traveled around the United States from post office to post office that people could go see for free. We have some more romance novels, so I mentioned the fiction collection earlier. So Donna Baker is this British author who actually came to the Rakow Library to learn about local glass. So we have a bunch of local glass history books about Frederick Carter and Hawks cut glass, things like that. And then the last book in her trilogy, The Glassmaker Saga, is set in Courtney, New York, and based on the early 1900s history here, which was really fun. We have a couple examples here of flame workers who have been inspired by our collection. So Wes Fleming is one of those many people who loves the Blaschkas in their work. And we have design drawings that feature insects that the Blaschkas made. So here we have some wings from a couple of insects. And then Wes actually made a special for our exhibition. We were really lucky. He made this model of Bombus virginicus, who did details like the pollen on the bee's legs. And then we have a replica of the original design drawing that he based that piece off of in the case. So this is a really great example of what we're doing in this exhibition. It's up for 2 years, so we rotate things every 3 months. So each case has kind of the same stories going on, but you'll see new things. So if you actually are here a couple of times, it's worth it to come back and see the exhibition a few times. We also have Paul Stankard's work here. So he actually has donated part of his archival collection to us. including some of the books that he's used over his lifetime of creating these paperweight pieces. So the book over to the left is one of a set of, I think, either 3 or 4 volumes that he used to directly inform and inspire the flowers and the plant creations that he would then put in his paperweights. So this is the crystal gem. It's one of his kinetic sculptures. And like I mentioned earlier, he was inspired directly by these itinerant glassworkers, these people who traveled around and demonstrated glassmaking to the public for hundreds of years. So, you can see similarities between something like the Fairy Queen, which we saw, the real piece upstairs, and the crystal gem. And actually the crystal gem is the name of a steam engine that some of the itinerant glassworkers had created and traveled around with in the 1900s. And we have some images of some of these people as well. But it's really fantastic to be able to show how people have used our collection, especially artists come in and use our materials in all sorts of different ways that we could not have imagined they would have used them. So it's always really wonderful to hear how people have been inspired by the different things they find here.
So another really interesting part of this Curious and Curiouser exhibit at our library are these collections of advertising posters from glass eye or prosthetic glass eye making companies. And our flameworking team has been really obsessed with this stuff. And for demos, we like to support the different exhibits that we have going on at the museum. So for the past year and continuing into next year, we will be doing prosthetic glass eye demonstrations at our flameworking demos. So what you see here actually shows you all the individual steps that are taken to get through a traditional prosthetic glass eye. So a couple of the advertisements are from American companies and also a German company. But you're not going to see glass eyes in the US very often nowadays. Around the time of World War II, we couldn't get the glasses that were necessary to make good prosthetics. They all came from Germany. We couldn't get them during World War II. We had soldiers coming home with injuries, they needed prosthetics. So the US government started a program to come up with a different process and a different material for prosthetics, and they settled on acrylic. So most of the time when you hear about somebody in this part of the world having a prosthetic eye, it is going to be acrylic. They may still refer to it as a glass eye, but yeah, they are acrylic.
All right, so thank you so much again for coming and visiting us at the Rakow Library. We hope you'll come see us in person, but please also visit us online. We have a catalog of all of our materials online. We have guides for flameworking, color, design, all sorts of different topics. And then finally, we also have our Ask a Glass question service, so submit all of your questions to us. Our friendly library staff will be happy to help. Thanks again.